Please welcome back to the stage, Shannon Colbert.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Final plenary of the day this afternoon, focusing on from the front lines of climate change. Rising sea levels, flooding, heat waves, drought, wildfires, and more intense and more frequent hurricanes and other storms that devastate our communities, disrupt cultural practices, and upend economies. Our communities are on the front lines of climate change, and often they're the ones that bear the greatest burden. And with some of them facing relocation as climate refugees, while others look to more measures of adaptation and trying to look at mitigation on local, state, and national scales. I'd like you to welcome Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici of Oregon to start off our session. Congresswoman Bonamici serves as the co-chair for the House Oceans Caucus, a bipartisan group of House members committed to taking action to protect the health and the future of our oceans. She's led legislation supporting tackling marine debris issues and plastics, promoting blue carbon and nature-based solutions, tackling ocean acidification and monitoring, and supporting STEAM education and a stronger workforce and development for the next generation. She is truly a leader on every facet of what it means to have stronger oceans, coast, Great Lakes, and communities. For the Congresswoman's work, we're honored to also have her featured a few years ago at our Ocean Awards Gala as our Leadership Award. Very, very overdue and a very good honor to be able to give to her. So with that, I ask that you give us a warm welcome for Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici.
Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome back to CHOW. It's great to be with you. I'm honored to be here in person with you now for Capitol Hill Ocean Week to address the critical issue of our time, the effects of changing ocean conditions on the planet and on our communities. From the coast to the heartland, the ocean climate dynamic affects us all. And I know this because I represent the beautiful Oregon coast in the Pacific Northwest. The world's ocean is a remarkable force, regulating weather and climate and playing a vital role in maintaining the delicate balance of our ecosystems. The ocean provides a crucial ability to sequester heat and emissions through storage and redistribution, enabling life to thrive. But as we all know well, the consequences of a warmer ocean are far-reaching and profound. Rising seas, flooding, heat waves, drought, wildfires, which we're experiencing right now here in Washington, D.C., the smoke from the fires in Canada, and increasingly intense hurricanes and storms. They're stark reminders of the challenges we face. These events devastate communities and upend economies, leaving families displaced, livelihoods destroyed, and entire regions in turmoil. The effects are not confined to coastal communities. They affect us all, and we know they transcend boundaries and, indeed, demand collective action. Amid these many challenges, we have also claimed victories, wins for the ocean that remind us of the power of collaboration and collective action. Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, a clear victory with key protections for coastal communities and ocean health. This is the largest U.S. investment in climate, with a $2.6 billion fund going to coastal climate resilience. Pretty incredible. And earlier this week, NOAA began to roll out their implementation plan to direct these funds to our communities in need. And our wins go beyond the Inflation Reduction Act. We also passed several ocean-focused measures in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. There's some in the CHIPS and Science Act and also in the year-end budget legislation we passed last December. So we have made progress addressing ocean acidification, promoting the blue economy, ocean exploration, preventing illegal, unregulated, and unreported, or as you all know, IUU fishing, restoring coastal reefs, protecting marine mammals and sharks, and increasing community resiliency. And all of this led up to the exciting announcement of the first ever Ocean Climate Action Plan, which will be critical in exploring ocean-based climate mitigation and adaptation, identifying gaps in climate and ocean science and management, and also enhancing ocean science and policy. So this is remarkable progress. It deserves celebration, and everyone in this room today, NGOs, scientists, academics, decision makers, businesses, advocates, and more, you all deserve appreciation. These achievements, we could not have achieved this remarkable progress without you and your leadership. So thank you to everyone here at CHOW. And as the co-chair of the Bipartisan House Oceans Caucus, I'm honored to be a part of this community, a coalition really committed to safeguarding the ocean and championing its sustainable use. Together, we have made significant strides in advancing policies that promote conservation, restore habitats, and combat climate change. But as we celebrate these accomplishments, we know and we must acknowledge the work that lies ahead. Our nation's adaptations goals demand attention, and we must make it a priority to support the specific needs of communities across the country, especially frontline communities who are the first to feel and are feeling the life-altering effects of climate change. It's environmental justice woven throughout. Tomorrow, I'm introducing a bipartisan resolution in support of World Oceans Day to demonstrate the commitment of Congress to continue protecting, conserving, maintaining, and rebuilding ocean resources. And with your leadership, we can forge a path that preserves ecosystems, supports adaptation goals, and creates a future of prosperity and resilience for all. So thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for being here. I look forward to continuing this very important work together and building on the progress we have made. Thank you again.
It's my pleasure to welcome Heather Ludemann, the Ocean Program Officer for the David and Lucile Packard Foundation. Ms. Ludemann leads the Packard Foundation's work on marine conservation in the U.S. Her grant-making and investment portfolio at the foundation focuses on advancing the ability of U.S. marine ecosystems to sustain biodiversity and productivity as pressures and demands on these systems grow. Heather?
Thank you, Shannon and Representative Bonamici, for joining us today. And thank you all for joining our session this afternoon, where we're going to be hearing from leaders on the front lines of climate change. As Shannon mentioned, my name's Heather Ludemann. I work for the Packard Foundation, and it is my pleasure to introduce this session. Already today, we've heard several inspirational leaders who are exemplifying the kinds of creativity, drive, solidarity, and action that will take from each of us gathered this week to achieve ocean justice. In this session, we have the opportunity to listen to leaders about the various ways that they have rallied ocean communities to engage action now, to quote Queen Quet from earlier today. The current reality of our world is that the impacts of climate change are life-threatening and ever-increasing. The message that we should be taking from this reality is that not enough of us have led with the kinds of values that create sustainability, justice, and equity for ocean communities and the ocean itself. These are the values of unity, community power, indigenous knowledge and leadership, and they are what each of us must prioritize in the work we do. I want to acknowledge that each of the panelists that will be joining us here on the stage soon have already achieved success with their communities on behalf of the ocean and all of us. I'm grateful for our panelists' tireless efforts, and I'd be remiss to ignore the adverse conditions under which many have been working. The communities most impacted by climate change have often also experienced historic injustice and inequity. These are the same forces that drive and fuel climate change. They're already living with and preparing for higher sea levels, bigger storms, and more flooding. It's critical that we listen and learn from their successes, their creative approaches, and importantly, their needs, so that we can become better partners in this collective fight against climate change. I am pleased to introduce our moderator for this afternoon's session, which is Janie Bavishi, Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and Deputy Administrator. The Assistant Secretary is responsible for providing NOAA's direction with regard to climate resilience, fisheries, coastal and ocean programs, including efforts related to NOAA's implementation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. She's an expert in the field of climate adaptation and resilience. Before joining NOAA, served in the New York City Mayor's Office as Director of the Office of Climate Resiliency. With that, I'll turn this over to the Assistant Secretary to moderate our panel and give a heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of the speakers that will be joining us today on this stage, and for all of you for joining us. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Heather, for that generous introduction. Thank you for the National Marine Sanctuaries Foundation for putting together such an inspiring set of conversations. It's great to be back. I want to really focus on this incredible panel we have. So I'm going to say very little to get us started. It's really the stories and experiences of the panelists we have here today that will guide the conversation. I will say one thing, and it is a little bit of a plug. By now you've heard about the historic announcement that NOAA made yesterday many times, $2.6 billion for coastal resilience to support our communities and economies in the face of climate change. I do want to mention and uplift one part of it, which you may have also heard, but I'll take my moderator's prerogative here to emphasize the technical assistance and capacity building that will be part of these funds. And it's so important, right? We're not at a level playing field when it comes to building resilience to climate change. There are discrepancies and inequities in capacity and access to resources. And so we're very proud that we're investing and allocating this money into technical assistance and capacity building. And we're also very proud to be making the space to listen to our partners on the ground in communities that are leading this work. So without further ado, I will briefly introduce our panelists and then really hand over the mic to them to give them the space to introduce themselves. Sitting to my left, Arthur Johnson, Chief Executive Officer of the Lower Ninth Ward Center for Sustainable Engagement and Development in New Orleans.
Thank you.
Irela Bagay, Chief Bay Officer for Miami-Dade County. Carol Reamer, Director of Ocean Policy for the Makah Indian Tribe. I'm sorry, I got my order mixed up. Delbert Pungawi from the Sivukak village in Alaska. And Hector Varela Velez, Community Organizer for the Surfrider Foundation in Puerto Rico. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists, like I said, to introduce themselves, but within your introductions, it would be great if you could share a little bit about the history of your community, the priorities that you are working to advance in your efforts, and why climate change is increasing the urgency of your work. And Arthur, we'll just go down the line. I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. Again, good afternoon, everybody. Again, Arthur Johnson at the Center for Sustainable Engagement and Development. We're a community-based nonprofit that was created after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And our focus is threefold. It's natural environment, built environment and economic development, and health and nutrition. And all of these domains lace towards building sustainable communities, particularly communities of color and underserved and overburdened communities. Many of our communities of this nature are also by large watersheds. We're a coastal city. We have the Gulf of Mexico. And so the importance of the work that we do and the significance is, again, making a difference and making sure that we educate and that we help our communities be part of the decision-making process as it relates to climate change. This hasn't always been the case, and it's a constant challenge, shall we say, as we address these issues. So not only are the issues of climate change and weather impacting our communities, but also having a presence. Policies and things of that nature are also important as we make a difference to try to bring about a course. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to our discussion and input. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here all the way from Miami, which is considered ground zero for sea level rise. And so my job is to work closely and advise the mayor and our commission to really set forth the recovery of our watershed, Biscayne Bay, which is a national park, it's a marine sanctuary, it's an aquatic preserve, and it has a number of designations, and it's also the mainstay of our economy. So when we always talk about, when we talk about South Florida, we talk about the environment is the economy. And so it is important that, you know, recovery and restoration of that ecosystem is very important to us. I can't talk about Biscayne Bay without talking about America's Everglades and Everglades restoration. And so with that, back in the 40s, we literally, the Army Corps of Engineers came to our communities and literally drained the swamp. And so with that, our relationship with the management of water has been, you know, intrinsically involved in our daily lives. And now, as we've grown, we're seeing how growth and land management has also impacted our resources, particularly our relationship with water. With sea level rise, that makes that system, that engineering system, which is channelized with canals and pumps, and we just manage water in a very interesting way, probably very, very unique way in the world, really. And so now we're trying to restore that ecosystem back to the way nature had it, because nature had it right the first time. So it's a long-term process. When we talk about water quality and my position, I have to thank NOAA for a report that was published 7 years ago that basically stated that Biscayne Bay was at a tipping point and close to a regime change. That just unleashed a whole level of advocacy in our community that was really there, but had no voice. And so I thank NOAA for giving us a voice, because since then, we created a task force. We've developed a plan to really get that bay back to shape, and a recovery plan, and really setting those nutrient pollution targets. But you know, climate change has exacerbated that ecosystem even more in the water quality. We've had seagrass die-off. We've had a devastating fish kill in August of 2020 that actually created a whole new level of advocacy that got us to where we are today. And so I would say be careful what you recommend. You might just end up doing that job, because I chaired the task force. And so, but I can continue to go on, but I will leave it to our other panelists to talk about what their work is.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carol Reamer. I'm the director at the Port of Neah Bay. I come from the Packard tribe. I was born and raised on the reservation in Neah Bay, Washington. I come here with, I think, what the Packard tribe is faced with climate change for the last 20 years has been extreme water shortages. We are limited with water. The rain patterns have changed over the years. We've noticed extreme droughts. Last November, we experienced a wildfire in November. The temperatures were 80 degrees, and it's really unusual for weather that high in Neah Bay. Typically, we live in a rainforest, and when you don't have enough fresh water to service the needs of the residents of Neah Bay, 2007, the Makah tribe created a resolution. Mandatory water conservation was implemented for the months of April to October. And so we've done a lot of education with our members on water conservation uses. And recently there has been an ocean policy work group created and a climate change work group created. We meet regularly and looking to the future, what can we do as Makahs to leave Neah Bay a better place for future generations to come? Thank you.
Delbert?
Good evening. My Hongatka Ipestin Ianga Lalorm Kistunatka Delbert Pangawi Honga Kiwamit Pikatna Yukatna Amataka Honga Masingat Nunalwood Katna. My name, Yipik given name is Ianga. My English given name is Delbert Pangawi. I am a tribal member of my Masinga Nation, sovereign tribal nation. The island I'm from is St. Lawrence Island. Original name we like to call it is Sivokok, literally meaning rung. After the last age, it is legend is that the Creator reached under and pulled the earth up and wrung it and put it there. In the middle of our island, we have a river called Fossil River. When you crack the rocks open, there's sea creatures. So that proves that once upon a time, it was under the ocean. I was told when I was a young child, and they want us to never forget our identity, who we are, our spirituality, our belief, that since time immemorial, our belief, spiritual belief, is that the four sacred brothers, the white, the yellow, black, and the red, that we are one big family on this earth. I think that's very important. The world needs to hear that. We are all one big family. And so I was born in 1959. My eyes opened to the world when I was 3 years old. It was very hard, harsh winters. We had 9 solid months. And the Gulusik, the polar ice, the scientists call the multi-year ice that's been around since the last ice age, would come and set the winter. Kunkuta, in our language, we call that Gulusik, the polar ice, Gulusik, literally meaning the mother ice. Another word we call it is Shikupiuk. Siku in my language is ice. Shikupiuk is the real ice. They're huge, huge behemoth, 25, 30 feet tall, beautiful blue color. It would come and set the winter, and 9 long solid months. 2 types of winter in my language. When it winters, it's extremely cold, 60, 75 below zero. It is said, wintered as a man. When we have mild winters, warm winters, wintered as a woman. And so it was, times were hard. We had no electricity, no motorized vehicles, stove oil heaters were just being introduced. We were still on dog team. And before November, before the Thanksgiving, the whole of the Bering Sea would be completely locked up. No open water. Men would go in all directions, out to the ice, miles, looking for walrus hollow, breathing holes, seals breathing holes, miles out, 10 miles out, over. And times were hard then. To me, it was beautiful, beautiful ice kingdom. that as long as we had food, it was good. I love that. I miss that. And I was raised by my grandparents, and they explained to me that to never forget our identity, but also that in 1983, my grandfather told me that what we are witnessing today, when the whole of the Bering Sea locked up, to us that's Uksuk winter. When there's open water, it is not winter to us. So the winter we have now is 3 months, if we're lucky 4. To us, that is not winter anymore. And so our food security as its greatest threat, the Bering Sea's ecosystem is on a downward spiral. So I'd just like to highlight that, the Oceans Week. And it is told from our ancestors that the Bering Sea, the Arctic Ocean, is the heartbeat of the oceans. And Alexis Will, my niece, she has witnessed the catastrophic die-off of the auklets, the merbirds, and they are finding that there is not enough food. They can't figure out what is causing their death. The catastrophic die-offs. I explained to the scientists that what 9 months of the winter, which created the phytoplanktons, the krill, the copepods, unbelievable trillions and trillions of pounds of that, which would feed the entire Bering Sea ecosystem, from the tiniest to the biggest, the bowhead whale. And so the Bering Sea is not producing enough food for the entire ecosystem. So it's on a downward spiral. It's like balancing, teetering. If it falls the other way, that if the Bering Sea ecosystems, this is very scary, it should be to the scientists and everyone else, that if the Bering Sea's ecosystem collapses, I'm afraid and I believe that it will have a domino effect with the other oceans. And so it is at its greatest threat, and our food security at its greatest threat. That's the fear in my community, that we fear of how we're going to be able to sustain ourselves without our food. And so the one more thing I'd like to highlight is that one of the greatest threats, not just in the Arctic, but throughout the world, is the toxic chemicals. And the scientists have proven that our food was the healthiest food in the Arctic. And they have proven with their researchers that we were the healthiest humans on the planet. And now they are finding that we are the most contaminated humans on the planet. And that is all the chemicals that have been accumulating through the airstream just in the Arctic. The Arctic is the most contaminated, and the scientists are warning that as the loss of ice is occurring, it's going to be spreading throughout the oceans and be airborne again, and that is a threat to all our food security in the oceans and all the animals that we depend on. That threat is for all of humanity. And so, on behalf of the indigenous people, as earlier the speaker said, that in this day and age, indigenous people are under assault, in some countries worse, fighting for our lands, to protect our lands, to protect the Arctic. And the world needs to see and understand that what little indigenous tribes that are left in this world, what we are fighting for is not just for our own selves. We are fighting for all of humanity. And when I was going to London to speak in 2018, my 6-year-old daughter, she was aware of what's going on. I just want to share this real quickly, and I'll end it with that. She was aware of my advocating for the climate change, and I teach them the same thing about our Creator, our Mother Earth. We are Yupiks. I apologize for that. She asked me, "What are you going to do in London, Dad?" "I'm going to go speak at the UN and the IMO in their annual meeting." And she paused for a moment and she said to me, which really, to the core of my being, she looked me right in the eyes and she said to me, "Right, Dad? You're going to go speak for me and all the children of the world?" I said, "Yes, love, I am." And so, to all the decision makers, and to the world leaders, and all the citizens of the world, to take a look at your family, your children. That is who we are fighting for, to protect our earth, our Mother Earth. And so with that, I will end it. Thank you.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Héctor Varela, soy de Puerto Rico, una bella isla en el Caribe tropical.
Hi everyone, I'm Héctor Varela and I'm from Puerto Rico, which is a beautiful island in the Caribbean.
Vengo de una comunidad muy pobre en el pueblo de Isabela, al noreste de Puerto Rico, donde se vivía de espaldas al mar. Nadie sabía nadar y mencionar el mar era hablar de fantasmas y de cosas misteriosas.
I'm from a very poor community in the northeast part of the island. It's called Isabela. And we lived with our back to the sea. No one knew how to swim. And when you talked about the ocean, that was like you were talking about something surreal, you know, ghosts.
Quizás eso me dio curiosidad y llegar a ver revistas de surfing impulsaron mi intención de conocer el mar y practicar el surfing.
And perhaps that's why I became curious and became interested in surfing. And that's what pushed me to want to get to know the ocean through surfing.
Cuando pude empezar a escaparme con mis amigos a la playa, porque no me daban permiso, vimos cómo destruían las increíbles dunas de arenas que existían en nuestra región. Teníamos un desierto.
So I would sneak out of the house and go down to the beach with my friends. And we would see what was being done to the sand dunes on the beach. They were destroying them. Nothing was left but a desert.
Nadie hacía nada y yo me preguntaba como joven de 17 años qué podía hacer, cómo podía hacer un cambio.
No one was doing anything to help, and as a young person, 17 years old, I thought, I wonder what I can do to change this.
Cuando llegué a la universidad, que fue un gran logro en mi comunidad y personalmente, ya que nunca lo vi, pude conocer personas maravillosas de diferentes departamentos y diferentes áreas académicas en la universidad.
When I went to the university, which was a great achievement for me personally and also for my community, I was able to meet all kinds of people from different departments, different academic disciplines.
No tenía el mejor promedio y estudié administración de empresas con una menor en educación y una en psicología. Sin embargo, me reuní con todos los que estaban estudiando conservación ambiental y con los profesores del Departamento de Ciencias Naturales.
I actually studied business administration and I have a minor in education and psychology, but I'd often meet with people who were studying environmental conservation, students and teachers, and also people who were studying natural science.
Y basado en mis experiencias, se las compartí con estos estudiantes de diferentes disciplinas y creamos una organización activista, la cual se basaba en que nos escucharan. Y la única manera que nos escuchaban eran con las manifestaciones, las protestas, ya que nos veían muy jóvenes y no nos prestaban atención.
And based on this experience, I started to share what I thought should be done with these other young people from these academic disciplines. And so we founded an activist organization so that people would listen to us. And the only way that they would listen to us, they really didn't take us seriously because we were so young, was through protest.
Eventualmente empezamos a trabajar en las dunas de arenas que vi cuando destruían cuando niño, sin tener ningún tipo de conocimiento, solamente siendo autodidacta junto a los estudiantes y viendo los procesos de restauración de dunas.
So we started working on restoring the sand dunes, the ones that I mentioned that I had seen when I was younger that were being destroyed. But I didn't really know what I was doing. It was all self-taught, but we forged ahead and began restoring the sand dunes.
Y aunque tuvimos que seguir manifestándonos para que nos escucharan, eventualmente fuimos creciendo y nos fuimos haciendo expertos en nuestras áreas académicas. En mi caso estudié una maestría en mercadeo buscando traducir el vocabulario científico en un vocabulario sencillo que las comunidades pudieran comprender.
Well, we kept protesting to be heard, and meanwhile, we were actually becoming very skilled, even experts in what we were doing. I then got my master's degree in marketing, and my focus has been to translate scientific language into everyday language so that the citizens in my community can actually understand what we are talking about.
Eventualmente la comunidad empezó a comprender estos datos científicos y aunque el gobierno no lo ha suministrado todavía, creamos una reserva comunitaria llamada Mabodamaca en honor a nuestro cacique o nuestro indio de la región.
And eventually the community began to understand. They were able to grasp these scientific data. And although the government had not taken steps, we decided to create our own community reserve called Maiduyamaka.
Mabodamaca.
Thank you. Which is actually an Indian god.
Se han sembrado más de 18,000 plantas en este lugar y allí nació el programa de restauración de dunas de Puerto Rico, el cual trabajamos en la universidad, estuvo hasta el 2014, eventualmente salí del programa, pero es uno muy exitoso que corre todo el archipiélago.
In this area that I mentioned, we were able to sow 18,000 plants. This was in our efforts to restore the sand dunes in Puerto Rico. It became actually a Puerto Rican-wide effort. It was very successful, and I worked on this at the university until 2014, at which time I actually left.
Dado a que no soy un científico, se me hace difícil conseguir trabajo en conservación y lo que me apasiona es esa línea, lo cual estuve trabajando en un negocio familiar hasta el 2017.
However, I'm not a scientist, so it was difficult to find work in the conservation field. Therefore, I worked at a family business until 2017.
Traté por muchos años de que las organizaciones y los proyectos de conservación ambiental comprendieran la importancia de poder transmitir el mensaje científico desde una perspectiva del mercadeo.
And I tried really hard for many years to convince organizations, environmental organizations, and people working on environmental projects of the importance of using marketing to be able to communicate scientific ideas with people.
Eventualmente llegó el huracán María y destruyó el negocio de mi familia.
And then Hurricane Maria hit, and it destroyed my family's business.
Estuve un año sin trabajar, bueno, mucho trabajo, pero sin generar dinero, porque estuvimos trabajando con las comunidades.
And I had no work for a year. Well, actually, I worked the whole time, but I wasn't paid. And I spent that whole year helping the communities to rebuild.
Eventualmente logró conseguir algunos part-time y trabajos en organizaciones comunitarias, pero llegó Surfrider y empecé a trabajar con ellos hace 2 años aproximadamente.
I eventually got some part-time work working in community organizations, and then Surfrider came. And I've been working with that organization for the last 2 years.
Desde el principio entendieron el mensaje que les quise dar y estoy sumamente agradecido, al igual que con el Hispanic Access Foundation que me trajo hoy acá, y hemos podido crear grandes cambios.
And I'm happy to say that Surfrider, they understood my message, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm also very grateful to the Hispanic Access Foundation.
Entre algunas de las cosas que estamos trabajando en Surfrider Puerto Rico ha sido la restauración de dunas, que continuamos, la restauración de los mangles y creando enlaces entre todas las organizaciones alrededor de todo Puerto Rico.
So some of the things we're working on in Surfrider, Puerto Rico, is we continue restoring the sand dunes. We're also working on mangrove restoration and networking up all of the different organizations that work on the island.
Después del paso del huracán María, también murió el 95% de los manglares de mi pueblo.
After Hurricane Maria, 95% of the mangroves in my community died off.
Y fue sumamente interesante porque entonces muchas de las comunidades que no escuchaban empezaron a comprender la importancia de tener un sistema saludable de manglares.
And it's interesting because it was that point that many of the communities finally understood the importance of having healthy mangroves.
Hoy día hablamos con las comunidades, con los jóvenes, y le hablamos de las barreras naturales que tenemos en la región norte de Puerto Rico. Los arrecifes de coral, las dunas y los manglares.
And so when we go to speak today with communities and young people, we talk about the natural barriers that we have, the coral reefs, the mangroves, the sand dunes.
Y son las comunidades las que están trabajando arduamente por proteger todos estos ecosistemas.
And it's the communities that are working very hard to be able to protect all of these ecosystems.
Recientemente comenzamos un proyecto para establecer una nueva reserva marina en el pueblo de Aguadilla, en la bahía de Aguadilla.
We began a project very recently to create a reserve in the Bay of Aguadilla.
Y basado en los 20 años de experiencia con las comunidades y ahora entrando a la comunidad de Aguadilla, creé una filosofía llamada los 5 dedos de la comunidad.
And so based on my 20 years of experience in working with the community in Aguadilla, I've created this kind of movement or philosophical movement. And it's called the 5 Fingers Movement.
Of community. La mano es la comunidad, pero cada dedo es una sección de la comunidad.
So the hand is the community, and then each finger is one section, let's say, of the community.
Y cada sección de la comunidad tiene un interés particular.
And every section of that community or sector has their own interests.
Si intento reunir las 5 intereses para hablar de conservación, probablemente no vamos a terminar en una noche y se van a crear muchos conflictos.
And so if I bring the 5 interests together and we try to discuss conservation, I'm sure we'll get nowhere and actually we'll probably end up having conflict.
Así que estamos trabajando con cada sector de la comunidad, buscando cuáles son sus intereses, pero sobre todo estamos buscando dónde podemos coincidir, que es en la conservación de la bahía.
And so what we do is we actually take on each different sector individually, find out what their interests are, try to find points in common where there's consensus so that we can save Aguadilla Bay.
En este proceso se nos han unido el NAOPC y Packard Foundation.
Among others, Packard Foundation has been supporting us in this effort.
Y muchas organizaciones locales.
And we have many local organizations as well.
Actualmente se han organizado diferentes grupos u organizaciones y estaremos en New York en la parada puertorriqueña donde hay 2 millones de puertorriqueños hablando sobre las necesidades que tienen las comunidades.
And so we've been trying to bring together different groups, different organizations, and I just wanted to let you know we will be in New York participating in the Puerto Rican parade, where there are going to be 2 million people to be able to discuss our efforts.
Son las comunidades las que saben las necesidades que tienen y son estas las que pueden dirigir todos los aspectos científicos para establecer soluciones reales a los problemas medioambientales que confrontamos.
So it's the community. The community knows what their needs are. They're the ones who can actually direct efforts. They can actually take advantage of the science to be able to come up with real solutions to resolve our environmental problems.
Recuerdo que en la universidad leí una vez que decía, tenemos que ser el cambio que queremos ver en el mundo.
And I remember in the university reading that we need to be the change we want to see.
Gandhi. Y es lo que estamos intentando hacer. Quiero agradecer por la oportunidad de estar acá con ustedes y recordemos que somos ciudadanos de un solo planeta.
That was actually something I read by Gandhi, and I just wanted to let everyone know that we're all really trying to move forward with these efforts, and as others have said, we are all here together on this planet.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. And Hector, you really gave us the perfect segue into the next question that we wanted to highlight here today, which is, you all model some of the values of some of the values that the Biden administration has been really focused on, equity, environmental justice in your work every day. Can you share a bit more about how you are centering your community's values and priorities in your work? And maybe, Carol, we can start with you. I know you have some slides to share too, and I hope that this is a good time to share them.
Okay, thank you. This is a PowerPoint that we shared at the Salish Sea Ecosystem Conference. A little history about the Makah Tribe First Foods Climate Resilience Plan. This came by way of very early on in the pandemic, when a lot of people were still working from home, working remotely. I think that was challenge number one. When this opportunity came, it came in May of 2020. And so I was approached by the chairman of the Makah Tribe. We were interested in a working relationship with Washington Sea Grant. And so we met regularly, like weekly, for the first 12 months of the pandemic. And this is one of the slides that was shared in 2022. I'm not sure if it's on the board, okay. Kuritiak, people of the Cape. We are the southernmost band of the Lucile nations. We have inextricable dependence on the ocean. We are ocean-going people. During the 1855 treaty negotiations, one of our Makah leaders said, "We want the sea is our country." Reserved the right to retain our cultural identity based on our spiritual values. We ceded 300,000 acres of land for clearer treaty access to the ocean and its resources to hunt, gather, fish, whale, and seal within our usual and accustomed areas. Part of our project goals was to develop a First Foods Climate Resilience Plan rooted in knowledge of the Makah community. We wanted to assess climate risk to first foods, gather community priorities in many ways, including conversations with community members through a survey, and pilot strategies. So community priorities are the starting point for our climate resilience work. In order to know what our community priorities were, we needed to get their input. We started that, like I said, this was during the pandemic when we were under very strict COVID safety protocols. In the first slide, you see where the Makah Reservation was located on the very northwest tip of Washington. There's one road in, and we closed off the reservation for 2 years. So in order to get surveys, we held a First Foods clam chowder drive-through where we invited the community to come enjoy a cup of chowder, and if they would fill out a survey, we entered them into some door prize raffles to get more input from the locals. And part of the Makah Climate Strategy, 2015 to 18 Makah Community Engagement and Climate Impacts Assessment. I mentioned the Climate Change Work Group that meets regularly. 2019 Makah Climate Resilience Plan was created. From 2021 to present, climate resilience is in food sovereignty. 2018 to today, we've did a vulnerability assessment to ocean change on the Olympic coast with Washington Sea Grant. And in the first slide, I didn't mention it, but we have the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary adjacent to our UNA, tribal UNA. So 2018 today, Makah Community Engagement and Equity in Climate Planning. We continue to involve community engagement. We are planning a dinner June 21 of this year with the Makah Tribal Council and the community to talk about climate change and what the effects and impacts are to Makah tribe, to the treaty resources, and subsistence. Informal community engagement. So we gathered feedback through staff meetings held on food sovereignty, conversations with community members, piloting strategies, and evaluating. Part of the community survey methods, survey questions on the use of first foods, the accessibility to first foods. Not everybody on the reservation has commercial fishermen or ties to the commercial fishing fleet, so not everybody has access to first foods. We wanted to be able to bridge that gap in order for every household on the reservation to have access to their traditional first foods. From our results, we learned what kind of first food workshops the community wanted, the demographics behind varying interests, which first foods harvests most affected by climate impacts, the context is pandemic and heat wave. I did mention the community clam chowder feed. I think we've had 3 so far today. They have been very well received. More and more people are becoming interested in learning, what is climate change going to do to the Makah Reservation. And an example would be I can't think of it right now. Ocean, the rising level of the ocean, which is exposing artifacts on our Ozette reservation down south. So ground truthing the strategies. So we created a draft plan. We're testing the strategies. I mentioned the community dinner on the 21st of June, and hopefully we hope to finalize our final plan. These are our partners in the Makah First Food Sovereignty Group, which started initially with a small pot of funds through Washington Sea Grant, and with that effort, it is growing exponentially and continues to grow. We are excited about that, the opportunities that are coming. Thank you.
Arthur, can I come to you next? How are you centering community values and priorities in your work?
Well, we go community engagement, and we realize that the first thing for community engagement for us is getting the community to be educated and understand what are the issues and realizing those issues are changing. So we've had workshops, and we have sessions where we realize that large town hall meetings don't really work for our community. So we come to the community, we engage them. Sometimes it's sitting on their porch and talking with them. Sometimes it's taking a walk around the neighborhood, getting them to feel comfortable that they can share, and then building this element of trust. What we found is that many times in our underserved communities and communities of color, there have been so many obstacles. We've had them in the lower Ninth Ward with Hurricane Katrina and the whole recovery process. So being able to engage with them, to make them feel comfortable that we're sincere and that we will use the information in such a way that will be beneficial, not just using them, because they've shared a lot of information since 2005, and in continually understand. We've had COVID and how we address that, and there's been a very concern from our public officials and sometimes the public practice, which we understand as a process, but it doesn't always work as fast as community would like. So there builds some hesitancy about the sincerity that many times the processes don't provide. So we try to reassure them that, and we do things such as activities at our center and our other locations. Of course, it's New Orleans, and there's nothing like eating and talking and socializing, but you're getting work out of it. So it's fun, but it's also beneficial. We've also looked at how we work with young people. We've created a environmental internship program that we started 2 years ago. This will be our third session. And these young high schoolers are coming in and actually doing research on environmental research on air, land, and water. But the research they're doing is linked to their communities. So they're not all in the lower Ninth Ward. And so they take that research into their communities, looking at, for example, heat and the impact that's having, and also in water, and evaluating the quality of the water that they're drinking, from bottled water to faucet water, and how that's impacting their community. So it's really truly getting the young people involved, but it's also they're feeding into their families. So we're building a cadre of not only community scientists, but also the support of realizing they can play a role in understanding the elements of climate change, and also the impact that we've taken to our public policymakers as well, and got them engaged, because when they see community being involved, they're politicians, they want to be connected with that too. And so then it's starting to ease that concern of trust as we bring them in together. And again, not at City Hall or these public meetings, but right there in the community and in the neighborhoods, sitting down on a step, rolling your sleeves up, should we say, and just having that conversation instead of a lecture. And these things seem to be working. But we also know there's so much that has to be done. And even from the national level, the importance of understanding what's happening in our watersheds, in our Gulf of Mexico, for example, in our region, but also in other parts of this country. And so sharing that and engaging is a way of bringing community together, so that the community members beginning to understand that what's happening, for example, in the far Northwest, or what's happening in Hawaii even, is not so different than what's happening around the Gulf Coast. What's happening in Texas as we're along that Gulf Coast, and Florida are very similar to what's happening in Louisiana in relation of the challenges that our climate change is bringing, and how we're looking for solutions for that. And so those things, bridging those gaps that they don't always see, is really helping to bring a sense of calm as well as interest in being engaged, and realizing that to be engaged means that you have to be prepared, you have to do some of your homework, and then you're able to talk and look at solutions and challenge when those solutions are not ones where you think will make a difference in your community. So these are kind of the things that we're building upon, and it's a continuum. So it's not like you're doing one and done. You're continually doing this on a daily basis. The other key thing is that they realize that we're, as an organization, will be there. We were there through COVID, we were there through Katrina, Ida, and we're not going anywhere. And so that also brings a sense, thank you, that also brings a sense of trust, in a sense of realizing that dependence, you can depend that we'll be there to help when there's a problem, or whether that's a massive problem like a hurricane or a tornado, or whether there's just individual challenges that come sometimes in our day-to-day trials and tribulations of life. We've come up with ideas. For example, we were able to get some solar generators, and because of course after Ida and our whole system kind of collapsed in New Orleans. People were out lights for several days, including the city government. So we were able to get solar generators, particularly to help seniors and those families who had health issues that needed the electricity. And so we shared them with many of our neighbors, as many as we could. And that also built a base of understanding this thing we call clean energy, and how that's different than the generator that is, needs fuel to process, needs to be outside. You can put this more manageable piece of equipment in your house and continue to do that. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And again, it's about building that understanding, and it's a continuum. It's educating, it's getting them involved, it's making, they are part of the discussion and the process. And so for us, it's making sure that they're at the table, not just on the table when they're dealing with these impact of climate change.
Thank you, right there. Carol, I want to come back to you. You represent county government. How do you center equity and engagement in your work?
Well, leadership matters, partnerships matter, education matters. And so on the leadership side, it's important to have leadership that makes the environment top center of their administration. So I work for a mayor who has made 4 pillars: the environment, the economy, equity, and engagement. There's her 4 pillars of her administration. So we all work under that. And she's very deliberate about not just planning for climate change, but actually taking action now. We heard that earlier, kind of a call to action. And so we have developed, she's spearheaded a climate action plan, a sea level rise strategy. We're actually going towards shore power in our cruise port. Miami's the cruise capital of the world. So as far as taking action now, that's precisely what we're doing. We've made a goal of going net zero by 2050. So getting our cruise ships to stop, pumping all that carbon dioxide into the air is important for us. So that's going to be completed by this fall. So we're working fast, but it takes leadership. Partnerships. For the past 15 years, our county, along with three other counties in South Florida, have been working together, tracking sea level rise and working to implement solutions regionally. We've been engaged for in many implementations, even going after grants together, and we meet every year to update those goals. We sign a compact together, and we've also developed a business for resilience strategy, which basically is a call to action for our business community that we need to invest in resilience today, because we're either going to pay now or we pay later, and paying later is a lot more expensive. We're starting to see those challenges with insurance. Insurance is rising exponentially in South Florida and in Florida in general, in the entire state. We saw the devastation that Hurricane Ian had on the West Coast. So we are now engaged in partnerships with our 34 municipalities and county government, very diverse community, and we're partnered with our state government. The state government has stepped up and invested over $70 million in the restoration of Biscayne Bay. So we're very proud of the work we've done in just 2 years. So I'm like, we're fast tracking. We know we're ground zero, so we're working hard. We're also engaged with the Army Corps of Engineers. I mentioned the flood control system that they built over 60 years ago that obviously needs to be renovated. But we're engaged with them in another project dealing with coastal risk storm surge, basically, and developing new strategies with the Corps. try to get the Corps to go from gray to green and implement nature-based solutions and multiple lines of defense, starting with our reefs, our dunes, mangroves, incorporating different strategies that are not just a gray wall dividing communities, because that is just not going to work in a community like ours. It's not going to work in any community, frankly. So it really engaging in partnerships also with our NGOs, with our environmental organizations that are critical and they're at the table with us, and charrettes, and developing a lot of these different strategies that we hope can be models for the rest of the country, if not the world. So we're very proud of the work we're doing. And lastly, education. We're all kind of learning as we go, because let's face it, climate change was not something we were really talking about or even doing anything about 10 years ago. So today, we're not just educating our public and our communities, but we're also educating our elected officials. There's a lot of adaptation going on in our state, but not so much climate mitigation. And so we're trying to bridge that gap, because you can't do one without the other. And so really moving forward towards that solar, energy independence, resilience, energy resilience is something that we started to talk about. And again, Miami-Dade is leading in that effort, mitigation and adaptation. So we're very proud of that. And so again, leadership, partnerships, and education is critical for our, in our path forward.
Thanks, Irela. Hector, I want to turn back to you, and this is actually a question for all the panelists. We are running short on time, so I ask that each of you keep your answers brief. But in the audience, you have staff from federal agencies, staff from congressional offices. I would love to hear, in your efforts, what support do you need from the federal government? And I want to qualify that a bit, because we often hear resources, but we also know that federal resources aren't the only thing that communities need, and often federal resources aren't the right answer. Technical assistance, capacity building, there are other things that are important ingredients for the work that you all are doing. So you're welcome to say resources if that's what you need, but would love to hear what kinds of support do you need from the federal government?
La situación política de Puerto Rico es completamente diferente a lo que se puede vivir en los Estados Unidos.
The political situation in Puerto Rico is completely different from the one that you experience here in the United States.
Nosotros tenemos múltiples agencias estatales que fueron punta de lanza en la conservación y en la redacción de las leyes.
So we have multiple state agencies that spearhead efforts, legislative efforts, and are involved in drawing up legislation in Puerto Rico.
Lamentablemente, la corrupción ha hecho que estas agencias no cumplan con sus roles ministeriales.
Unfortunately, due to corruption, these agencies actually do not fulfill the goals that they set out.
Y es donde las comunidades han tenido que salir a la calle y manifestantes han recibido hasta tiros de policías privados en protesta.
Perdón, ¿qué ha pasado con la policía privada?
Le dieron un tiro a un manifestante.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, so we have had to go to the streets. Communities have had to protest, and we've actually had people shot by private police officers or private guards.
Y ha surgido un reclamo de las comunidades a las agencias federales que tenemos, como la Agencia Federal de Protección Ambiental, el Fish and Wildlife, el Cuerpo de Ingenieros, para que tomen más acción en Puerto Rico.
So what the communities are demanding now is that federal agencies step in and actually do something. And when I say federal agencies, I'm referring to the EPA, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Corps of Engineers.
En diferentes lugares en Puerto Rico se están destruyendo hábitats de especies que están en peligro de extinción y no vemos la acción de ninguna agencia estatal o federal.
In many places in Puerto Rico, we see that habitats being destroyed, habitat where there are, for example, fish that are in danger of extinction, and we see no efforts being made on the part of the federal government to do something about this.
Y creo que este es un excelente foro para pedirles que puedan ir a Puerto Rico o movilicen sus agencias y nos ayuden a confrontar estos problemas frente al cambio climático.
So I think that this is actually the perfect forum for Puerto Rico to send that message that we want agencies to come and we want them to be able to help us face climate change.
Las comunidades están con las puertas abiertas y estamos buscando crear relaciones con el gobierno municipal, estatal y federal.
The communities have their doors open, and what we are seeking to do actually is to create relationships at all levels of government, municipal, state, and federal.
Por último, y no menos importante, se está haciendo un llamado al Cuerpo de Ingenieros de los Estados Unidos a que cree un comité independiente, técnico, para trabajar con un montón de proyectos que quieren establecer en Puerto Rico actualmente.
And finally, I would like to launch a call to action to the Corps of Engineers. What we would like is for the Corps of Engineers to create an independent technical committee that will take up the many projects that we would like to push forward in Puerto Rico.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Delbert, briefly, would you like to talk about any messages you'd like to send the federal representatives in the room?
Yes, I would like to share what my grandfather told me in 1983, that our mother is preparing to renew herself, and she does so very violently, and she goes through an ice age after that. And it's kind of lengthy, but I'll shorten it. And he says to me that he ended it with that we are very, very close to our returning to our ancestral way of life. And he had a message he wanted me to share, Alfred Tumlu on my mother's side, 1983, that he wanted me to message to the world and a warning to the world that in my time I'm going to witness these climate change crises that we are witnessing today, the loss of ice, which will have worldwide consequences. And as we speak, for many decades now, we all have been witnessing the catastrophic disasters, the consequences worldwide. His message is that we must protect what little ecosystems we have left for all our children and their future. And if we fail, the consequences are that these catastrophic disasters are just going to continue to magnify and quantify, that it's going to become more and more frequent at magnitudes that man has not known, to the point where they will become apocalyptic, cataclysmic disasters. And so I would urge all the nation leaders, decision makers, to listen to the scientists' warning, the UN Attorney General's warning. The latest message from the UN Attorney General is that we must cease all oil and gas development. And the scientists have warned that many years ago, that what 80% of the oil that's left in the world must be left alone. And what did the nations do? Open millions upon millions of acres of land for oil and gas development, which has been that atmosphere, climate change, heating up our atmosphere. And if we get struck with apocalyptic, cataclysmic disasters, for those of us that witness that, will be the last thing that we witness. That we have been told by Ingmar Igby that the greatest threat to mankind, to humanity, is chemicals, the toxic chemicals. I agree with that. The greatest threat to me that chemicals is a slow genocidal suicidal path that we are on. But the greatest threat, nothing can match that. The wrath of our Mother Earth, in our belief, our Mother Earth. When we get struck with the apocalyptic cataclysmic disaster, she has the potential. And the scientists warning that we are faced with mass extinction of animals. And I fear that we have been witnessing that up north with the catastrophic die-off of our seabirds, fish, seals, walruses. They are the most contaminated as well. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. If mass extinction takes place, we'll be right behind them. And for my message to the world leaders here in America and all the parts of the world, that we must unite, that if anything in this world that we can make us unite to protect our children and their future is this climate change crisis that we are in. We must unite and work together. All of the citizens of the world must stand together and demand it to cease this oil and gas world. We have hard choices to make. The economic development and the benefits of it, or protect the earth. The hard choices we have to make. Are we going to tough it out now and do what is right that needs to be done? Or are we just going to, as the U.S. Attorney General warned, that if we continue in this path, it is suicidal. So that is real, and we are witnessing it. And so the urgency and the crisis that we are to take immediate action, as some speakers earlier said, we need to take action today and not tomorrow. And the pain I carry in my heart is I lived my life. I enjoyed our world. I'm on the last leg of my journey, and this is my destiny, that I will fight for my Mother Earth to my passing. This is my people's journey, that we were brought here to be the guardians and the protectors of our Mother Earth. As you all can see, that's what we are up against. But we no longer stand alone. All of us here, scientists, environmentalists, all now we are standing together, and I'm proud of that, and our voices are being heard and respected. I thank God for that. Atashi ukut, ancestors say. We are one big family, the yellow, the white, the black, and the red. We are one big family. We are not to war with each other. We're not supposed to oppress or suppress one or the other, or force our beliefs to one or the other. Atashi ukut means we are all one. We are one big family. Let us stand together, protect our Arctic, protect our lands, our resources for our children and their future. They are the most powerful pain I carry in my heart. And I will end it with this, that my heart bleeds for all of us on this earth. That take action now, today, and not tomorrow. And I thank you for this opportunity, for allowing me to speak. And I am very proud and thankful that at least the world now is hearing our voices, that our knowledge that's passed on for thousands of years are relevant today, that they are realizing that, and that's why they are seeking us out. I'd like to thank the World Wildlife Fund and CHOW organization for inviting myself and my fellow brothers and sisters to speak with you, and hopefully that we will make meaningful changes, that for the leaders, America, you are the lead the world, to be an example, to unite the world, to protect our Mother Earth. And I thank you for that.
We'll just keep going down the line. Carol, do you have any messages for federal policymakers about what your community needs? And again, I apologize, but we'll have to be brief.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think I would say co-resource management with agencies and not just tribal consultation. Data deliverable and tools that align with tribal needs and priorities, such as making the environmental justice screen tool more directly useful tool for tribes. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Marilla?
I'll keep it short. We're very grateful for the support we've been getting from the federal government across the board, from FEMA, but particularly with the Army Corps of Engineers. We have, I think, we're the county with the most core projects, about 6 core projects in the country. So we appreciate the attention, but we really want to continue to have you listen to us. Don't tell us what we need, but let us tell you what we actually need. And so that's basically my message. Thank you for listening, Army Corps of Engineers.
One of the, we have to respect nature, and we have to listen to what nature is telling us. I will tell my policy leaders to engage our community. We have, the solutions, the natural solutions are within the community, and they're there. We need the type of opportunity and technical assistance. It's not all just financial resources, but it's that how we use those resources and how we engage our community. And again, don't leave out our young researchers, our young leaders. They have ideas, they have brain power, they have energy, and they're willing and wanting to be engaged. So we need to engage them and listen to some of these natural-based solutions that are helping us to deal with our challenges, because they are our future, and they realize that the importance of what they do is going to make a difference. It's going to make a difference for me because I have to depend on them, but it's also going to make a difference for others as well that follow. And so it's important to engage your community and get them engaged, work with them, listen to them, and then put those capacity, opportunities, and resources in a way that helps to make a difference. Maybe one community at a time, but that's how we build, and that's how we grow. And it's not always these big projects that's going to make the difference. It's going to be a lot of smaller projects that are really going to hit, and you're going to get commitment, and you're going to get that point of resilience within our communities to bring and meet the challenge, and again, respect and work with nature to realize that nature is there. They are going to do what they're going to do, and we have to work within that capacity to make a difference. I really appreciate the opportunity of being here at CHOW and being part of this whole process. It's so invigorating, and I thank you very much.
Well, I just want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for sharing your personal stories, your personal journeys, the challenges that your communities are facing, the incredibly inspiring work that you're doing to meet those challenges head on. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here and sharing those stories. And it's been an absolute honor to share the stage with you, so thank you. And Hector has, I think, a parting message here. Well, thank you again. Thank you for all the incredible inspiration you've left with us today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Janie. Thank you to our amazing panel. And thank you to all of you for joining us for this first full day of Capitol Hill Ocean Week, both in person as well as virtually. We're going to be actually beginning some of our additional virtual sessions, so the day is actually not over. And you can join any of our sessions that we have in virtual breakout sessions either in the next hour, starting at 4:45 Eastern Time. We have sessions that are hosted by the Walton Family Foundation, NOAA's Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, OAR, Hispanic Access Foundation, and then the National Ocean Protection Coalition. And as I said earlier, you can also watch those virtually on the platform as well as in the CHOW Ocean mobile app. I want to take a second just to say thank you again. These conversations require all of us being present, being intentional, thinking about our role when it comes to the work that we have ahead of us. And I think we've seen some amazing examples of hope and inspiration and innovation. And I hope all of us can truly take that back with us and think about how do we do the same in our lives, and how do we do the same in our work, and how do we do the same for our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors, and our communities. It really does take that sense of personal responsibility and the role when it comes to looking at our ocean, and as well as the larger global climate issue. So I hope that the conversations that we've had today have been inspiring and helpful. I look forward to seeing you all again for another day tomorrow of Capitol Ocean Week and some more amazing conversations. So let's have a round of applause for our final panel and everyone who contributed today. Thank you.